The notification appeared on Owen Reeves's datapad just as he was finishing his morning coffee in the station cafeteria. Transfer to Special Containment Wing, Section 9, effective immediately. His stomach dropped. Section 9 was the part of Meridian Station that everyone whispered about but nobody really talked about openly. It was where they kept the prisoners that the Galactic Coalition wanted to forget existed. Owen had been working as a security officer on Meridian Station for only 2 months. He was still learning the layout of the massive orbital facility that floated in the darkness between Earth's outer colonies and the frontier worlds. The station housed thousands of prisoners from dozens of different species, all of them labeled as threats to peace and order by the Coalition. But Section 9 was different. Section 9 was where they put the ones that scared even the other guards. His supervisor, a weathered man named Thomas Garrett, looked uncomfortable when Owen asked about the assignment. Garrett just shrugged and said the previous guard had quit without explanation. No notice, no debriefing, just packed up and left on the next transport. That was all Owen could get out of him. The rest of the morning felt like walking through fog. Owen tried to focus on preparing for his new assignment, but his mind kept wandering to dark possibilities. The briefing file he received was frustratingly sparse. Prisoner 623, it read. Species, Draconi. Height, approximately 9 feet. Weight, classified. Crime, political insurgency and conspiracy against coalition interests. Trial status, under review. Most of the document was covered in black redaction bars, as if someone had deliberately hidden anything that might actually be useful. Owen spent his lunch break reading through it 3 times, hoping to find something he had missed. There was nothing. That afternoon, Owen made his way through the winding corridors of Meridian Station toward Section 9. The station was a giant wheel spinning slowly in space, creating artificial gravity through its rotation. The main prisoner blocks were loud and chaotic, filled with the sounds of thousands of beings from across the galaxy. But as Owen entered Section 9, everything changed. The corridors became quieter. The lighting dimmed to a soft blue glow that cast long shadows. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor, each one seeming louder than the last. What struck him most was the emptiness. The other cells in Section 9 stood open and dark, their doors hanging wide like mouths frozen in silent screams. Every single cell was vacant except for one at the very end of the corridor. That cell glowed with the shimmer of active containment fields, a barrier of pure energy that crackled and hummed with power. Owen's hand drifted to the weapon at his belt as he approached. The briefing had been clear about one thing and one thing only: do not engage the prisoner in conversation, do not ask questions, just observe and report any unusual behavior. Then he saw her, and every expectation he had built up shattered in an instant. The cell was enormous, perhaps 3 times the size of a standard containment unit. Its walls were transparent, allowing him to see everything inside. And there, in the center of that massive space, was Sienna. Though he did not know her name yet, he could see she was magnificent and terrible all at once. Her body was covered in scales that shimmered like polished garnets, deep red with hints of gold that caught the light. Her wings, folded against her back, were bound by glowing energy shackles that sparked and crackled whenever she moved. More restraints circled her wrists and ankles, limiting her movement to a small area in the center of the cell. She was sitting when he arrived, her long tail curled protectively around her body, her head bowed low. But the moment Owen's boots hit the floor outside her cell, her head lifted. Her eyes were the color of molten amber, bright and intelligent and aware. They locked onto him with such intensity that Owen felt his breath catch in his throat. He had expected a monster. The file had used words like dangerous and unpredictable. His imagination had filled in the rest, conjuring images of some snarling beast that would throw itself against the walls and roar threats at him. But Sienna just looked at him with those amber eyes, studying him with curiosity rather than rage. Owen forced himself to move to the guard station, a small desk position to give him a clear view of the entire cell. He sat down and logged into the system, trying to ignore the way his hands trembled slightly. The monitors showed various feeds from around the station, security alerts, environmental readings, all the routine data he was supposed to be watching. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. There was something deeply wrong about the whole situation, though he could not quite put his finger on what it was. The shackles seemed excessive for someone who was not fighting against them. The cell temperature was set incredibly high, which probably made sense for a species that evolved on a warm world, but the humidity was turned down so low that it had to be uncomfortable. And why was she completely alone in this entire wing? Why were all the other cells standing empty? It felt less like security and more like isolation, as if someone wanted to make sure she had no contact with anyone or anything. The first few hours passed in heavy silence. Sienna barely moved except to shift her weight occasionally, causing the energy shackles to spark and hiss. Owen tried to focus on his duties, on the security protocols and system checks he was supposed to be running. But his attention kept returning to her. Around the third hour of his shift, he made the mistake of really looking at her face. She had been watching him the entire time, he realized with a start. Not with aggression or malice, but with something else entirely. Something that looked almost like exhaustion mixed with hope. Her scales, beautiful as they were, appeared dull in certain patches. Her wings showed signs of stress in their delicate membranes, tiny tears and thin spots that spoke of long confinement. She looked like someone who had been in that cell for far too long, like a bird that had forgotten what the sky felt like. Owen pulled up her file again and started searching through the sub-menus for more information. He found a capture date buried deep in the system logs. 4 years. She had been imprisoned in this cell for 4 years, and her trial status still said under review. 4 years without a trial. The number made Owen feel sick. The Galactic Coalition had laws about prisoner rights, didn't they? Protections to ensure fair treatment and speedy justice. How could someone be held for 4 years without even being formally charged? He started to dig deeper into the restricted sections of the file, but a warning message flashed across his screen in angry red letters. Unauthorized access detected. Further attempts will be reported to Station Commander Pierce. Owen quickly closed the file, his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced at Sienna and found her still watching him with those penetrating amber eyes. Could she tell what he had been trying to do? Did she understand what the monitors and controls meant? The rest of his 12-hour shift crawled by at an agonizing pace. Sienna never spoke, never attacked the walls, never did anything that would justify the extreme security measures surrounding her. She just sat there, watching him with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years. When his relief finally arrived, a young officer named Patterson who could barely look at the cell without flinching, Owen almost ran from Section 9. But as he reached the exit, he heard something that made him freeze. A voice, deep and resonant, speaking a single word in a language the corridor's translation system immediately converted. Human. Owen turned back, but Sienna had lowered her head again, motionless as a statue. Patterson was already settling into the guard station, oblivious to what had just happened. Owen stood there for a long moment, wondering if exhaustion had made him imagine things. But deep down, he knew he had not. Sleep refused to come that night. Owen lay in his small quarters staring at the ceiling panels, that single word echoing endlessly in his mind. Human. Why had she spoken? What did it mean? The regulations were absolutely clear about prisoner communication. He should file a report immediately, document the incident, let the chain of command handle it according to protocol. But something stopped him from reaching for his tablet. Maybe it was the look in those amber eyes. Maybe it was the way the system had threatened him just for asking basic questions about her case. Maybe it was the memory of why he had joined coalition security in the first place, to protect people and ensure justice, not to be part of whatever this was. Owen returned to Section 9 the next day with a knot of anxiety twisting in his gut. Patterson left the moment he arrived, muttering something about the environmental controls making him nauseous. Owen suspected it was not the environmental controls at all. It was Sienna herself. There was something about her presence that demanded attention, that made you feel the weight of your own choices in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. Sienna was standing this time, or at least standing as much as the restraints would allow. Her wings twitched against their bonds, small movements that looked painful. Owen settled into his chair and went through the routine security checks. Monitor containment field integrity. Review environmental systems. Check structural sensors. All standard procedures that should have kept his mind occupied. They did not. An hour into his shift, the lights flickered. It was barely noticeable, just a momentary dip in power that caused several systems to reset. Owen glanced at his control panel and noticed a light he had never seen active before. The translation array built into the containment field was now online, set to convert Draconi speech into English and vice versa. It had to be a system glitch, some minor error caused by the power fluctuation. Owen reached for the controls to shut it down, to follow proper protocol. Then Sienna spoke, her voice a low rumble that the translator rendered into clear, precise words. "Why do you guard me, human?" Owen's hand froze over the control panel. He should shut down the translator. He should ignore her. He should do a dozen things that were not sitting here in stunned silence while a prisoner spoke to him directly. The regulations were clear. No interaction beyond basic security protocols. "I asked you a question." Sienna's tone was not aggressive. If anything, she sounded sad, almost resigned. "Do you even know what crime I am accused of committing?" "I am not supposed to talk to you," Owen said, then immediately cursed himself. He was talking to her, was he not? He had already crossed the line the moment he opened his mouth. "Ah," Sienna said quietly. "They told you that. They tell all the guards that. Most of them never speak to me anyway. They are too frightened." "I am not frightened," Owen said, though even as the words left his mouth he knew they were not entirely true. He was frightened. She was nearly twice his height and clearly possessed immense physical power, even restrained as she was. But Sienna made a sound that might have been a laugh, dry and bitter as ash. "You should be frightened, human, but not of me. You should be frightened of the ones who put me in this cage and ensure I stay here." Owen glanced at his monitors. No alerts. No supervisors watching his feed at this hour. The night shifts always had minimal oversight. "What are you talking about? How long does your file say I have been imprisoned here?" "4 years," Owen said. "And what does it say about my trial?" Owen hesitated. "Under review." "Under review," Sienna repeated the phrase like it was poison on her tongue. "I have been locked in this cell for 4 years without formal charges, without legal representation, without anyone who will listen to my side of what happened. Do you know what that makes me, human?" "What?" "A ghost. Someone the coalition wants everyone to forget ever existed." She moved closer to the transparent wall, her face coming into sharper focus. Owen could see scars now, marks etched into her scales that looked like they had been left by the restraints themselves. "I was a negotiator for my people," she continued. "When the coalition came to claim the mineral resources on our homeworld, I tried to mediate. I tried to find a peaceful solution that would benefit everyone. They called me a terrorist and brought me here." "That is not how the coalition operates," Owen said, but his voice lacked conviction. He had spent the previous night unable to shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this assignment. The empty wing, the heavily redacted file, the way Commander Pierce had warned him not to ask questions about his posting. "For humans, perhaps," Sienna said. "For citizens of powerful core worlds with strong governments and economic leverage. But for species like mine, for beings from colonies that happen to be sitting on resources the corporations want, we are merely inconvenient. We are obstacles to profit. So they make us disappear." "I do not believe you," Owen said. But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind like cold water. "Search for information about the Draconi," Sienna said. "Search for what happened to our colony world, about the protests that were labeled insurgency and terrorism. You have access to public records, do you not? Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" Sienna was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost vulnerable. "Because yesterday you looked at me like I was a person, not a monster or a threat or a problem to be managed. You looked at me like I was a living being who mattered. No guard has done that in 4 years." Owen stared at her, his mind racing with questions and doubts and possibilities. "Even if what you are saying is true, what am I supposed to do about it? I am just a security officer. I have no authority, no power to change anything." "I know," Sienna said. "And I am asking too much of you. Forget I spoke." She turned away, moving back to the center of her cell. "You have your duty to perform. I understand that. Go back to watching your monitors, human. Pretend this conversation never happened. I have become quite good at being invisible." But Owen could not forget. Not for the remaining hours of his shift. Not when he returned to his quarters. Not when he sat in the station cafeteria staring at food he could not taste. Sienna's words had planted seeds of doubt that grew rapidly in the fertile soil of his conscience. That evening, Owen found himself in the station's public database, searching for information about the Draconi. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The Coalition had found massive deposits of rare elements on the Draconi homeworld, materials essential for faster-than-light drive construction. Mining corporations had immediately filed resource claims. The Draconi had protested, arguing that the claims violated their settlement rights and would destroy sacred sites. Those protests had escalated into demonstrations. The demonstrations had been labeled as terrorism by Coalition authorities. Dozens of Draconi had been arrested. The official Coalition reports painted them as violent extremists who had attacked mining facilities and threatened corporate personnel. But as Owen dug deeper into independent news sources and eyewitness accounts, he found a very different story. Peaceful protesters fired upon by corporate security forces. Families forcibly relocated from their homes. Community leaders arrested in midnight raids and disappeared into the prison system. And one name kept appearing in the independent coverage. Sienna, a diplomatic negotiator who had tried to find compromise, a voice for her people who had spoken too loudly and too effectively. Owen leaned back from his tablet, his hands shaking. He thought about why he had joined Coalition security in the first place. He had believed in protecting people, in upholding justice, in making sure the system worked for everyone. But what if the system itself was broken? What if he had become part of something that crushed the innocent to benefit the powerful? He thought about Sienna in that cell, trapped for 4 years without justice, without hope. His next shift started in 5 hours. He needed sleep. But instead, he kept reading, kept searching, kept pulling at threads of a story the Coalition wanted buried. By the time the artificial dawn cycle began on Meridian Station, Owen Reeves had made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. Owen's hands were slick with nervous sweat when he entered Section 9 for his third shift. He had spent the morning in his quarters, arguing with himself, trying to convince himself that what he was planning was insane. He had a career ahead of him. He had family back on Earth who depended on the money he sent home. He had every reason to keep his head down, follow orders, and not get involved in things that were none of his business. But he also had a conscience, and that conscience would not let him rest. Patterson was visibly relieved when Owen arrived early. The younger officer practically fled from Section 9, not even bothering with the usual shift handover protocols. Owen watched him go, then turned his attention to Sienna. She was sitting again, her tail curled around her body, her head resting against the cell wall. She looked even more exhausted than before, if that was possible. Owen sat down at the guard station and deliberately activated the translation array. The system chimed softly, confirming it was online. Sienna's head lifted immediately, her amber eyes finding his. She did not speak, just watched him with an expression he could not quite read. "I read about what happened on your homeworld," Owen said quietly. "I read about the mining claims, the protests, everything. The official reports and the unofficial ones." Sienna remained silent, but something shifted in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear, or perhaps both mixed together. "I need you to tell me your side of the story," Owen continued. "All of it. From the beginning. I need to understand what really happened." "Why?" Sienna asked. "What difference will it make? A single guard cannot change anything. You said so yourself." "Maybe not," Owen admitted. "But I need to know the truth. I need to understand what I am part of here. And if there is any way, any possibility at all, that I can help you, then I have to try. Otherwise, what is the point of any of this? What is the point of laws and justice if they only apply to some people and not others?" Sienna studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was sincere. Finally, she began to speak. Her voice was steady but heavy with emotion. "The coalition arrived on our world 15 years ago. At first, they were friendly, interested in establishing trade relationships and cultural exchange. We welcomed them. We showed them our world, our cities, our sacred places. Then the survey teams found the element deposits." Owen listened in silence as Sienna described what had followed. The mining corporations arriving with legal documents claiming rights to vast portions of Draconi territory. The protests that started peacefully but were met with increasing aggression from corporate security forces. The Draconi Council trying to negotiate, offering compromise after compromise, all of them rejected. "We were not asking for much," Sienna said, her voice thick with frustration. "We simply wanted to protect our sacred sites, the places where our ancestors are laid to rest, where our children are born. We offered the corporations access to other deposits, areas that held no cultural significance. But they wanted everything, every last resource, and they did not care what they destroyed to get it." The situation had deteriorated rapidly. Demonstrations were broken up with violence. Draconi leaders were arrested on fabricated charges. And then came the incident that sealed Sienna's fate. A mining facility exploded, killing 3 corporate employees. The coalition immediately blamed Draconi terrorists. Sienna and dozens of others were arrested within hours. "But I was nowhere near that facility," Sienna said, her voice breaking. "I was in the capital city, in the middle of a negotiation session that was being recorded. I have proof, documentation that shows I could not possibly have been involved. But no one will look at it. No one will listen. The corporations wanted someone to blame, someone whose arrest would frighten the rest of my people into submission. So they chose me." Owen felt sick. "And the trial?" "There has been no trial," Sienna said bitterly. "Every few months they say it is being scheduled, that my case is under review. But it never happens. I think they plan to keep me here until everyone forgets I exist, until my people give up hope and stop fighting for their rights." Owen stood up and began pacing, his mind racing. This was worse than he had imagined. This was not just bureaucratic incompetence or a flawed system. This was deliberate injustice, calculated cruelty designed to serve corporate interests. "I have to do something," he said, more to himself than to Sienna. "I cannot just sit here and watch this happen." "What can you do?" Sienna asked. "You are one person with no authority. If you speak up, they will simply dismiss you or worse. They will add you to the list of people who need to disappear." "Then I will be careful," Owen said. "But I cannot do nothing. That is not who I am." He turned to face her. "Do you still have that evidence you mentioned?" The documentation proving you were not involved in the explosion? Sienna nodded slowly. It was confiscated when I was arrested, but it should be in the evidence archive. If anyone could access it. Owen sat back down at his terminal and began searching through the station systems. He had limited clearance, but over the past 2 months he had learned a few tricks, ways to navigate the bureaucracy that were not exactly by the book but were not technically illegal either. He found the evidence archive after 20 minutes of searching. Sienna's case file was there, but accessing it required authorization he did not have. He tried anyway, using a supervisor code he had accidentally seen Thomas Garrett enter one day. The system thought for a moment, then granted access. Owen's heart pounded as he began downloading files to an encrypted personal storage device. Surveillance footage showing Sienna in the capital city at the time of the explosion. Timestamps and metadata proving the videos were authentic. Communications records showing she had been in continuous contact with negotiators throughout that day. It was all there, evidence that should have resulted in immediate release, except no one had bothered to look at it or deliberately chose to ignore it. "What are you doing?" Sienna asked, her voice tense. "Making copies," Owen said. "If something happens to the originals, if they mysteriously disappear, there will be backups." He finished downloading and carefully hid the storage device in his jacket. But this is just the first step. Evidence does not matter if no one with power is willing to listen. Over the following weeks, Owen became increasingly careful and increasingly bold at the same time. He continued his shifts in Section 9, maintaining the appearance of a dutiful guard following orders. But in his off hours, he began reaching out to people who might be able to help. Independent journalists who had covered the Draconi situation. Legal advocates who specialized in coalition prisoner rights. Human rights organizations that operated in the frontier worlds. He shared the evidence carefully, anonymously at first, testing the waters to see who could be trusted. The response was slow but gradually building momentum. A journalist published an article questioning why Sienna had never received a trial. A legal advocacy group filed a formal inquiry with coalition authorities. Small protests began on a few worlds where the Draconi had allies. It was not much, but it was something. It was the beginning of pressure that the coalition could not completely ignore. But Owen knew it was also dangerous. Someone would eventually trace the leaked information back to its source. He was right. 2 months after he had first spoken with Sienna, Commander Pierce summoned him to her office. Owen walked through the corridors knowing this might be the end of everything. Pierce was a severe woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She gestured for Owen to sit, then placed a datapad on the desk between them. "There has been a leak of classified information regarding prisoner 623, she said flatly. Information that could only have come from someone with access to restricted files. Someone like a guard assigned to Section 9. Owen's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to meet her gaze steadily. "I do not know anything about that, Commander. Do not insult my intelligence, Officer Reeves." Pierce leaned forward. "You have been accessing files you have no business looking at. You have been asking questions about things that do not concern you. And now evidence that was supposed to remain sealed has found its way to journalists and activists." Owen said nothing. His mind raced through possible responses, but none of them seemed adequate. "You have put yourself in a very difficult position," Pierce continued. "The corporations that operate the mining facilities on the Draconi homeworld have significant influence with coalition leadership. They are not happy about the attention this case is suddenly receiving. They want it to go away quietly, and they want anyone responsible for the trouble to go away with it." "Is that a threat, Commander?" "It is a warning," Pierce said. But then something unexpected happened. The commander's expression softened slightly, just for a moment. "Off the record, Officer Reeves, I want you to know that not everyone in this station agrees with how prisoner 623 has been handled. Some of us have raised concerns about the lack of due process. We have been told to mind our own business. Owen stared at her, not sure he had heard correctly. Are you saying that you think she is innocent? I am saying that justice should not be something reserved only for those with money and power, Pierce said carefully. I am saying that if hypothetically someone were to ensure that evidence of innocence reached the right people, someone with enough authority to force a real investigation, that would be an interesting development. But I am also saying that such a person would need to be very careful, because there are powerful interests that would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who becomes too much of a problem. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken understanding hanging between them. Pierce stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. You are dismissed, Officer Reeves. I suggest you focus on your duties and avoid any further complications. As Owen left her office, he understood what had just happened. Pierce had given him a warning and permission at the same time. She could not help directly, not without risking her own career, but she was not going to stop him either. 3 days later, Owen made his most dangerous move yet. He contacted a coalition senator known for her advocacy on prisoner rights, a woman named Helena Vargas who represented one of Earth's districts. He sent her everything. The evidence files, documentation of Sienna's 4 years without trial, witness statements from other Draconi prisoners, financial records showing payments from mining corporations to coalition officials. The response was swift and explosive. Senator Vargas called for immediate hearings. Major news networks picked up the story. The pressure became too great for coalition leadership to ignore. 2 weeks after Owen sent those files, official notice came through. Prisoner 623 was being transferred to Earth for a formal trial overseen by an independent tribunal. Owen was at his post in Section 9 when the transfer order arrived. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Sienna would finally get her day in court, a chance to present her evidence, a chance for justice. When he looked up, he found Sienna watching him, those amber eyes bright with something he had not seen in them before. True hope. The energy shackles were deactivated. Medical personnel arrived to check her condition before transport. As they prepared to move her, Sienna looked directly at Owen. "Thank you," she said simply. Those 2 words carried the weight of 4 years of suffering, 4 years of hope deferred but not extinguished. Owen nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He had done what he could, what he believed was right. The outcome was still uncertain. The trial might go against her. The corporations might still find a way to manipulate the system. But at least now she had a chance, and sometimes a chance was all anyone could ask for. As Sienna was led away from Section 9, walking on her own feet for the first time in years, Owen sat down at the guard station one last time. He thought about duty and justice, about following orders and following conscience. He thought about how easily systems could become corrupt, how power could be abused, and how important it was that some people were willing to stand up and say no, this is wrong, even when it cost them everything. His career with coalition security was probably over. There would be investigations, consequences, possibly even charges. But as he watched Sienna disappear down the corridor toward freedom and justice, Owen Reeves knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes doing what was right meant risking everything. Sometimes duty meant more than following orders. Sometimes it meant following your heart instead.